All right, in this lesson right here, what we're going to do is take a look at how we go about transforming objects inside of 3ds Max. Transforming. Zach, what comes to mind when I say that word?
Robots that turn into jets and tape players and pistols and semi-trucks.
Okay. Perhaps on Saturday...
Transformers.
No singing, please. Perhaps Saturday mornings or weekdays after school hours, that may be the case.
What's wrong with that?
But when you're becoming a serious 3D modeler and animator, when you hear the term transform, you need to think move, rotate, scale. And sometimes when you hear move, you can use the word translate as well.
Well, you're absolutely right, but I just want to know here and now that even the serious animator can still watch Saturday morning cartoons.
No, I do agree.
Okay.
It's quite an important day for me. So how do we go about transforming objects inside of 3ds Max? Well, it's very easy, actually. There's several ways to go about it. First thing let me do is I'll go ahead and create a very complex object so we can work with it. Ooh, I don't like the color, though. Let's give it a more serious tone. All right, now we have something we can work with. So, transforming the object. First, if I want to move it, here's a move icon. This will give me the select and move tool.
Okay.
This is my select and rotate tool. And this is my select, and in this case, uniform scale, and you'll notice it's got the little triangle in the corner, so if I click and drag this down, it's got to fly out.
Awesome.
Allowing me to uniformly scale it, non-uniformly scale it, or even select and squash objects. In other words, by volume.
That's awesome.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and leave that over here on uniform. Come back over here, and I'm going to go ahead and activate my select and move icon, and you'll notice that what I have now is what is known as a transform gizmo. Transform gizmo is a manipulator that will allow you to manipulate the object visually on your screen. Okay, so I could just simply come over here and grab this guy and boop, 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 boop. We're moving around. It's just that easy.
Nice sound effects. That
was
great.
Thank you very much. And we have different manipulators for each of these different operations that we're going to perform. Okay, so let's take a look at what's so cool about the manipulators. First of all, before we get into
the gizmos.
The gizmos. Yeah, we'll go ahead and start calling them gizmos because that's what they are. First of all, let's talk about some kind of generic things before we get into the actual axis constraints with them. If you would like to make them larger and smaller, plus key, minus key.
That's convenient.
Simple enough. They do from time to time get in the way, like if we were working on selecting vertices and we were all the way zoomed in, we've got vertices that would be up underneath the handle here, and that could be a bit of a pain. So if you were to hit the X key, that can get rid of it for you. Another thing to watch out for is up under Views, you have Show Transform Gizmo. If that is turned off, you can hit the X key all day long and you're not going to see it. I have had students in the past come up to me and say, Buzz, could you please come over here and look at my 3ds Max and tell me, what happened to my gizmo? Because I can't find it. Well, just come up to Views, turn it back on, and usually they go, oh, sorry. So, simple enough. Okay?
I did apologize, though. That's what's important.
That is. So anyways, moving right along. All right, so now that we've seen how to increase and decrease its size, how to make it visible or invisible, now what I'd like to do is go ahead and talk about the different features that we have built in. First of all, you'll notice that we've got different handles and they're color-coded. And you'll find color coding going on with all of these. If you notice the rings with the rotate tool, you'll notice that they're color-coded, and the scale is color-coded as well. Basically, we've got red, green, and blue, RGB.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we have X, Y, and Z. Well, if you're manipulating red or X, well, red is X. How's that for confusing? It's actually not confusing. They match up with each other. Guys, I'm giving Zach a hard time here. He's barely following along.
I have to keep a diagram of this next to my computer.
I understand. I've got big colored markers I'm about to start writing on his hand so he knows what's what.
That'd be awesome. Could you also write left and right on my hands?
Turn your hands over.
Oh, they're still there. Sorry.
So
I haven't washed my hands since
basically, if I want to move in X, that's going to be red. Green is Y, and of course Z is going to be blue. All right. Now you'll notice that as I move my mouse over these different handles, that they light up yellow. That indicates that I'm going to be constraining the object to that particular axis. In this case, it's X. So as I move it, I'm moving it in the X axis only. I cannot move it in any other axis. A better way to demonstrate that is by coming up here to a top view, grabbing, and up and down. Look at that. Can't do it. Only left and right. So same thing up here for Y, and same thing down here for Z. But What happens if I need to transform this thing along a plane, or in this case, translate it on a plane? In other words, 2 axes. Well, in this case, I'd come down here, and you'll notice these little handles right here. Okay? So I can just grab one of the handles. They illuminate yellow, and I can just simply drag it like this. So here I'm moving it on the XZ axis over here, on the YZ axis, and if I wanted to do the XY axis, down up under here.
Which is great, because they actually highlight to show you what plane you're moving on.
Absolutely. And now I want to show you the center, because we can also do perpendicular for the camera, but to get to this, you have to understand that you do have some settings that you can set in regards to the gizmos, and a lot of people don't know about this.
Cool.
So what we'll do is we'll just go ahead and come up here to Customize. We'll come down to Preferences, and then from up under Preferences, you'll find a Gizmos tab. From up under the Gizmos tab, look at this. Transform Gizmos. Well, that's what we're working with down here. On, we're going to show axis labels, allow multiples, the size of it. Look at this. So we've got Move, we've got Rotate, and we've got Scale. So it's broke all 3 out. And we're not going to cover all these. I just wanted to show you a couple of things. One thing that you might find interesting, these little handles right here that allow you to move on a particular plane with 2 axes. Let's change this 33% offset to 100, and check this out. Boom. Now they're full size from point to point of the Z, or of actually of all of the different handles.
That's pretty cool.
Now you've got a giant plane, if you'd like to, for translating this guy. Okay? Let's go ahead and jump back in here really quick and reset that back to 33. And here's the big one that I wanted to come in and show you. Center move handle, or center box handle. I was like reading up. I was like reading all over the place. So let's go ahead and click on the Move in Screen Space. Go ahead and click OK, and we get a little bitty box down here. In fact, if I go ahead and hit G to turn off my grid, you can see the little box better. If I click on that box and drag, there you go. Okay? So very interesting to have this ability to just come in, center, and move it along in screen space like that. So with that out of the way, we can just go ahead and leave him on. So you do have a bunch of different settings that you may be interested in going up and playing with inside of your preferences area under Gizmos.
Absolutely.
All right, so now moving right along. Next thing I want to do is go ahead and move over to Rotate. We'll come back to the type-ins in a second. Okay, so with Rotate, all right, get ready for this. How's that for tough? All you do is you simply grab and start rotating the guy away.
And it tells you the degree that you're rotating?
It's going to tell you how many degrees. You're going to get some data feedback. So here it comes. So there's some data. So I can see how far I'm rotating that particular object. You can also see, I'm using my pen to point, that it's not going to do much good. But you can see that we get this slice. Okay, see the slice, the highlighted shade?
Sure.
Watch this. Watch what happens when we rotate all the way 360 and start to go over.
Oh, wow.
Now
so it's like layering.
Yeah, so it gets darker and darker. So that's going to be a visual feedback to you, letting you know that you've already wrapped all the way once around.
That's sweet.
So we've got 493. It's another thing that I can point out while we don't have time to really go into details. If I come back in here to Preferences, you also have rotation method that you can select from.
Okay.
So let's go ahead and, with that out of the way, we see that rotating these, no big deal. Simple enough.
Can you rotate on more than one axis at a time?
Yes, and that's what I'm doing right now.
Oh, very cool.
Look at that. And you can see this as I manipulate these objects. Look down here, and you'll be able to see with those fields down there that the numbers are indeed changing. So in this one right here, we are rotating around X, Y, and Z as we're rotating perpendicular to the camera.
Okay, can you just like freely rotate? Like grab in between the axes?
So you mean like you just want to come in here and rotate like such on all of them?
Awesome.
Man, it's all there, of course. Most incredible tools in the world. Moving right along, we now have our scale. And we do have the different ones that we can choose from, but, you know, using the uniform and the difference between uniform and non-uniform, it's all actually built in with this gizmo already.
Cool.
So if I wanted to, I could just simply come in here and, you know, right now by dragging out with the center select, you see how the center is highlighted yellow at the moment.
Right.
The entire thing is going to uniformly scale. If I was to come up here and just scale on Z, I am now definitely non-uniformly scaling the object. If I wanted to do a particular axis, I can click over here and scale it. And what's really cool is, look at this. I can bias it more towards Z, then perhaps out a little in Y, more towards Z, out a little bit in Y. It all depends on how you drag this. So it's very...
That looks really wild.
It's very easy to do, very usable, very cool. Okay?
Awesome.
So all good stuff. Now, of course, if you were... scaling this guy on one particular axis or whatever. Well, let's just go ahead and come down here. And if we were going to squash.
I love squash.
Okay, let's just wanted to show squash real quick. We're maintaining volume.
Right. So actually, technically that's called scaling by volume.
Yeah. So all is good.
Right.
Okay? So simple enough. Now let's go ahead and talk about a few other things real quick before we move on. First of all, getting access to these 3 icons. Another way that we can easily go about doing it. Anytime you want, you can simply come over into your viewport, right-click, bring up the quad menu, and from in there you can go to your rotate, your move, rotate, or to your scale. Okay, so that's definitely handy.
Very nice.
Next thing, you can type in specific locations. In other words, if I come up here to my select and move, I can come down here and I can give it an absolute world coordinate, or I could come over here and give it an offset, such as let's move this guy over in X 25 units. Hit enter, he moves over 25 units, and of course this X does indeed reset to 0 because after all it was just an offset to where it was originally.
Exactly, it's just waiting for the next offset you're going to type in.
But over here it's not going to reset to 0 because that's the real deal.
Very cool.
So right click on these guys and you can go and type in specific transform numbers.
Cool.
And then of course down here in the bottom as well. You can always come down here, throw these guys in there, type in specific numbers for locations, whichever tool is selected. Also, you can come down here and jump into a relative mode. It's the same thing you saw in the type-in box just a second ago, where if I wanted to perhaps make this guy go up 50 units, hit enter, and we've gone up 50 units. It also set back to 0. Okay?
Very cool.
So another thing that you may find handy while working with these tools, of course, is you notice how I only have my move tool icon visible when I move my mouse over the gizmo. If I come down here and lock the object, since I now can no longer select any other object,
right,
the icon stays and I can move it from anywhere I'm at on the screen.
That's very cool.
So that's very handy. Okay, one more thing. When working with these transforms, how the information is actually applied to the object is based on the pivot point. Now, we've got the reference coordinate system, and this is something that we're going to be getting more involved with a little bit later on, but I did want to bring it up, which is where we've got, basically we're going to be using view, screen, world, etc. A really good one might be, let's say I wanted to come over here to rotate, and rotate this guy at an angle. Come back here to move, and what if I wanted to slide this thing along its polar axes? But right now, look at this. I can. It's moving straight up and down.
I see.
If I was to come up here and change this over to its local coordinates, when I rotated it, I rotated its local coordinate system with the object, and now I can indeed slide it along its polar axes. So this is very handy.
Well, are those reference coordinate systems individual for each tool?
Yes, they are, as a matter of fact. Check this out. How we've got this one, the move and select, or select and move set to local. If I come over here, this guy is still on view, which is default.
That's
Scale's
really nice.
the same way. But if I come back here to move, it's still on local.
That's cool, because you might want to be scaling in one coordinate system and moving in another.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, you'll find yourself, especially when working with bones and all, always rotating in a local mode.
Right.
But, of course, when you're working with your translate tool, then you're going to be working in a view mode.
Sweet.
Okay? So one final thing is when working with multiple objects, basically how are we going to use the transform center? Okay. So with the transform center, if we click on this, we've got 3 different things that we can choose from. So right now, if we had multiple objects, it'll make it a little bit easier to see. So I'll go ahead and select all of these guys. Right now, let's just go ahead and use the center selection. Click and go ahead and drag down and down to this guy. Now we're going to be using individuals if we wanted to. Okay, so let's do rotate. Be a little bit easier to see this. So come down here, and so now when I rotate, look at this. All the objects are rotating around themselves.
Okay.
Now, if I was to go back to the single, it's in the center, they all rotate around that point.
Wow, that could come in really handy.
Or I can use a coordinate system and come down here and say pick, and perhaps I want to pick this guy and come down here and say rotate around that selected object that's been picked as the coordinate system.
Now, that's very nice.
And that's definitely a handy feature. Okay. Finally, and something that this will be covered a little bit later, is we do have the ability to come in here and snap. We're not going to be getting into this right now, but that does go along with a little bit more advanced transforming. Again, the idea of this VTM is to stay as quick and simple as possible to get the job accomplished. People up and running with 3ds Max.
Exactly.
And so with that, Zach, I think I've covered everything I wanted to talk about in regards to transforming objects. Is there anything that you want to add?
I can't think of anything.
All right, at least from a basic point of view. So with that, that's going to wrap this lesson up. Thanks, everyone.